So first job, while I'm waiting for my tarpaulin to arrive so I can get the shell off, get it wrapped up, get it outside, and then start looking at the chassis, stripping the old paint back, seeing what we've got to work with. Let's do a couple of small jobs, hopefully small jobs in the meantime. So first of all, pulled the carbs. As you can see, they are a little bit worse for wear. This one, whilst the valve does move, you can see inside is absolutely caked. The other one moves a bit more freely. That one's not so bad at all, but again, they are both absolutely caked in crap. So I think the first thing we're going to do is degrease them, give them a bath, give them a rub down with a wire brush, and just get as much of the crap as we can off them, and then we'll have a little bit of a closer look at them, see if they actually need stripping down completely. Get all the fluff out of them. Looks like sawdust in there. I'm guessing someone's been cutting wood next to it. It's moving reasonably freely, but they are absolutely full. Right, let's give them a bath. Okay, so we've cleaned one of the carbs out, and then we're going to do the second one. I didn't want to take them apart at all, but there's a load of crap inside them. It looks like powdered MDF. I'm guessing someone's been cutting near it, and they're just full of crap, so they're going to need cleaning out. I can't have that going through the fuel system. So there we go, get a chance to learn about carbs at the same time. All we're doing for this one is zapping them with a bit of engine degreaser, letting it sit for a minute, and then attacking it with a wire brush. And I've also got a little toothbrush there as well. Just for that one we can really get into those corners and start to get some of the old grime off. Takes a bit of elbow grease, but you know, we'll get there. So we split it down into three parts essentially. We've got the pot with the piston, we've got the main body, and then we've got the fuel pot at the end as well. So strip it down, give them all a good scrub, get inside it, and then lag it in WD, clean it, dry it as best we can, and then I'll leave it somewhere nice and warm to properly dry out. These won't be going back on the engine for a long time yet anyway, so this is just to do a few jobs in the meantime while I'm waiting for my tarpaulin to arrive, so that I can actually take the shell off and then have a look at the chassis in more detail and start to work on the wishbones. So yeah, lots of scrubbing. I won't subject you to watching me scrub dirt off a carburetor. Okay, and that is our carbs all cleaned. Now they may not look it, but they actually have been cleaned. There's a certain amount of patina you get in the metal that if I really wanted to, I could get a rotary polisher and try and take that out. But as I've said before, I'm not trying to build a show car, so I'm not that bothered. As long as I know they're clean, they're lubricated and they're functioning properly, then I'm happy with that. So up until yesterday I didn't really know anything about carburetors. You know, it's a case of learn as you go. I've got a friend who's a lot more knowledgeable than me, whose brains I've been picking. He's also lent me quite a good book. So that's come in very, very handy. So these are SU HS4 Twin Carbs. They're a very, very popular type of carburetor on cars at the time. There's lots of other cars such as Minis and MGs that use the same style carbs. But if you're like me and you have absolutely no idea what a carburetor is and what it does, then I'm going to educate you. So, and I'll try my best to keep it in focus as well. So essentially what you've got is, if I flip it over to the intake side, so this side, so you notice you've got this butterfly valve in the middle, and this is what your throttle cable attaches to. The spring is always trying to pull it back towards you to keep it closed, and when you push the pedal, it pulls the cable, which opens this valve. So when you push the throttle, all you're essentially doing is letting air into the engine. Now, behind this butterfly valve, you have this piston, and this piston goes up and down. So the more air that is drawn through this chamber, well, as you draw air through the chamber, it creates a vacuum, and the vacuum actually pushes this piston up. So the more air that comes through, i.e. the more throttle, the higher this piston goes. Now on the bottom of this piston, you can possibly see in there, is a brass needle. And that needle is tapered, so it's thicker at the top and narrower at the bottom, down inside here, much like any other type of needle. So that needle is going down through a brass tube, which is inside this jet, which is where the fuel comes from. And the only thing stopping that fuel coming up here is that needle. As I say, the needle's tapered, so when it's all the way down like it is at the moment, there's practically no fuel coming through. So as you draw more air through, as the piston goes up, as the needle comes up, it allows more air to go through. So it's that mix of fuel and air. The fuel comes up through this part, which is called the jet, comes through this tube here, and comes from this pot. So this is where the pot where the fuel collects. So you have this little hose on the side, this goes to the fuel tank. So the fuel tank has petrol coming through, the petrol gathers in here, so basically it's a secondary fuel tank essentially. If you just had the main fuel coming from the tank going straight into this hose, or straight into the bottom here, when you floor it, you know, and use a lot of fuel, the fuel pump, which is mechanical and runs at a constant rate, might not be able to keep up. So by having a float chamber full of fuel, it means you can always get the same amount of fuel going in at the same time. Now inside that chamber there's a float, and this works exactly the same as the float in your cistern in your toilet. So when the chamber is empty, the float is at the bottom, the valve at the top is open, so fuel can come in and fill the chamber up. As the chamber fills with fuel, the float lifts, and when it gets to the top it closes that valve off and it doesn't let any more fuel in. And that is pretty much it. In a nutshell, obviously there's a lot more to it than that. This is just my rudimentary layman's terms of explaining how I've discovered that a carburetor works. As I say, I'm a first timer for this, so I'm learning as I go. Then you have this rather complicated looking linkage on the side, which was great fun trying to remember how to put back together. So you've essentially got two separate pulleys here. You have this one, which we know is the throttle. So this one is always held closed, and when you push the throttle, it opens this up. You also have this lever, which is your choke. So you may or may not know, on older cars you have a choke which helps them start. So when you open the choke, get this the right way around, you'll notice it's got this bar on it, which goes down to this jet, which we know is where the fuel comes through. So as you push the choke open, you notice it's pushing that down. Now this has the same effect as actually lifting that brass needle in there. So as you push this down, as you pull the choke, it pushes this lever down, it pushes the jet down, and therefore letting more fuel pass by the needle. The difference is obviously you're not letting more air in. So in order to raise the needle normally, we have to increase the amount of air to increase the piston height. But with the choke, we can allow more fuel in without letting more air in. And what this actually also does, you'll notice it's got this cam on the side which interacts with this screw here. So as we push the choke open, it also pushes against that screw, which also adds a little bit of air. You can probably barely see that butterfly valve moving right at the very end of that choke travel. So primarily you get fuel, and then right at the end you can adjust it obviously how much it interacts via this screw, screwing it in or out. Also allows don't know if I can even show it, a tiny bit of air. You can just see it moving there. And that's your choke. So choke, you can close it and let the air do the work, or you can use the choke on a cold day to give you a bit more gas to get the old engine going. There we go. And there's two of those, and they sit side by side like that. It's a 4-cylinder engine, so this one feeds 2 cylinders and this one feeds 2 cylinders. Getting them balanced up when it's running is going to be a whole different battle again, but we've got a lot to do in the meantime.